Autumn Party Sources, Marcus Hanson, Attorney Daryl Banks for plaintiff, and Attorney Kyle DeBreiker for defendant.
Okay. Good morning to all of you. I do note that we've had communication with your offices and you were working and resolving some issues. So I guess before we get started, the court needs to know what are the issues that we are left with that we need to address. Mr. DeBreiker, it was your motion. So where are we at in the case?
I believe the only issue we're here today to consider, Your Honor, is parenting time and the parenting time schedule.
Okay. Mr. Banks, is that your understanding?
That's my understanding, Your Honor. I believe there's some details surrounding the parenting time. I think there's still remaining some transportation decisions and pick up and drop off location, mode of transportation, that kind of stuff. But it's the details around the parenting time created by these parties, both changing states.
Okay. Well, they were in different states before. It just seems like that would be a very simple issue as far as transportation to figure that out. If they were in different states, they had to be doing it at some point. So
they have, Your Honor. In the past, they were at a distance where basically it was air travel because they were in Washington and Michigan and then Iowa and Florida. And now they're in Chicago area and Michigan. So we're about 220 miles difference between the parties now.
Okay. Well, guess I would submit or propose, at least as ways for transportation issues, that as typically happens in this case, that the parties are much closer. It's much easier. Why are they not able to meet at a halfway point?
Well, there's a couple of issues. Number one, we still are going to continue to follow it's not an issue, but it's actually an agreement. We're going to follow the court order as far as air travel is concerned. If Mr. Hanson wants to have air travel for the child, obviously we'll follow that. The other two requests, I don't mean to speak for Mr. DeBreiker, but the other two requests were, one, that he'll be allowed to send the child by train. My client has some concerns about that because there's no safety precautions relative to trains, and he's 15 right now. He'll be 16 in 2 months. And the trains Amtrak's got its own issues, but that she's doesn't feel real confident about that. The other deals with the automobile side of it. Has no objection to automobile, but Mr. Hanson's provided all the transportation for the last 5 years of whatever sort that there was, and she was asking that he pick the child up in Battle Creek at a secure location. That was her request.
And if I may,
just continue to provide the transportation like he always has in this case.
So she's not willing to meet halfway. That's what you're saying.
Well, she'll do whatever the court directs, but she would prefer that it be, that he continue to provide that transportation. She's going to do what the court directs her to do, Your Honor.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, well, sounds like that's an issue. It's a pretty minor issue, but we can proceed at this point. Mr. DeBreiker, do you wish to make an opening statement or simply proceed to your proofs?
Just a brief opening statement, really just to clarify what I think what my client's looking to do here today. Obviously, our motion entailed quite a bit. And as I just relayed to the court, we're really worried about parenting time here. That's his main concern. It's not just a transportation issue in his mind. The fact that they live closer than they have for years, he's asking for a different parenting time schedule. Currently, he exercises 6 weeks of summer parenting time in 2 separate 3-week periods. He believes that it's in the child's best interest to exercise that in 1 6-week period. We believe that's the summer time is about 12 weeks, so that's about half still. He's not looking to increase the summer parenting time, just change the schedule. And I think the court will hear some testimony about the child's the needs, medical needs, and why they disagree to that. Other than that, my client has very limited holiday parenting time as it is right now. Mom gets most of the holiday time. Case in point, my client's only had 2 Father's Days. He's only had 2 Thanksgivings. So he's looking for the holiday schedule to be modified, and as well as because that they live so much closer, perhaps 1 weekend a month. They do live closer, but obviously there's no doubt that they have still some distance between the two. And being that my client is in the military, his schedule is a little more detailed than what, the reasonable rights of parenting time would provide. So it does need to be tailored to the parties in some fashion. But when it really comes down to it, Your Honor, the issues are the parenting time schedule and the travel. My client, it was floated around way in the beginning of this case. The idea of the child taking the train wasn't really his idea. So that's really not a make or break it point. But he is looking for some cooperation when it comes to transportation. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Banks, you wish to make an opening statement, reserve your opening statement, or waive your opening statement?
I'll make a brief opening statement if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
So when this began, aside from the show cause issues that are not being addressed today, of course, there was never any mention of a weekend per month. That's something new. As a matter of fact, it's something in the last 48 hours that's now being floated around. As far as the 6 weeks in the summertime, my client has no problem with continuing the 6 weeks in the summertime of 2-3 week 2-3 week lumps like they have been, I think, for the last year. Maybe last summer was this way, was the first one. It had been expanded from 4 weeks. The problem with the lump sum of a complete 6 week time, and my client will testify to this, is that the court would call this young man, he's 15, he'll be 16 in February. He's a sophomore at Harper Creek, Your Honor. The problem is he has a condition called Klinefelter syndrome. For the last 2 years, he's been taking an injection once per month of testosterone. That is an injection like you would get at a doctor's office. It's not she can testify to this, but it's not like a diabetic injection or something like that. It's an actual in the muscle sort of thing. He had gotten those and she can testify to this, he had received those injections at the doctor's office for quite a long time. Then they trained Miss Curtis to be able to do those at home. So you have to have some training to be able to do this. That's number one. Number two, those have to be administered every 30 days, basically like clockwork. So it's a medical necessity. She can testify to this, that she can't just simply go to the pharmacy and pick up 2 injections and send one with the child to the Chicago, Buffalo Grove, I think Mr. Hansen lives in Chicago, for him to do, and he's not trained. She can only get 1 injection at a time. That would mean she would have to change the prescription location from one pharmacy to a different pharmacy, which she doesn't even know if that's how that's going to be like, and have to change it back to her when he returns. So it's not some kind of frivolous sort of whim that she doesn't want to give Mr. Hansen his 6 weeks in the summertime. It's just simply that the child has to come home at some point in order to get this injection. As a reference, this past summer, Mr. Hansen decided to have the 6 weeks of 3 weeks and then a weekend come back to mom and then 3 weeks. So if that occurred again this summer, that would give her the opportunity to arrange for the injection to be there so she could give that to him. That's the only objection to that. She doesn't want to cut down his time. As far as the holidays are concerned, my client doesn't have, I'll back up once. The testimony is going to show my client has no objection to the child coming back from Mr. Hansen's during the school year when the child's over there for Christmas break and then for spring break or any other holiday the court orders, coming back the day before Christmas. That would be a change from the existing order because he's been coming back on the Saturday before the school starting on Monday or whatever. She has no objection to that. So that's not an issue either. As far as the weekend per month, this child's almost 16 years old, and his input on this is important. Obviously, we all know that the child doesn't make the decision, but he's a sophomore in high school. His days of being a minor are numbered here. The child, my client has discussed with the child only, we're considering giving you another weekend with your dad per month. What do you think about that? That sort of thing, without getting in trying to influence him of any way, because if the child came and saw Your Honor and was interviewed, my client will be the first one to testify that she would want you to file an order what the child's wishes are here as far as what he thinks about that weekend per month. However, the child is not real keen on that because the truth of the matter is that this is 200 and some miles around Chicago, which we know is a traffic nightmare at times. So it's a 4.5, 5 hour sometimes drive between his home and to where Mr. Hansen's home is. That's 9 hours on a weekend in a 48-hour period. That's the child's concern. He would rather have the lump sum kind of the parenting time with his dad. If that means maybe an additional holiday, such as Thanksgiving, there's only 2 left because the next 2 years, he's a sophomore. If he wants to alternate those last 2 with Miss Curtis, she has no objection to that either, Your Honor. She's just trying to be reasonable. If there's another holiday that can be exercised without a big disruption in there somewhere, she's not going to object to that, Your Honor. She has no objection to that. And it's not her, again, she's not going to testify, hey, listen, I just don't want to give him this weekend per month. It's the child's preference that it not be exercised, that he have these lump sums and maybe some more holidays. These are issues, quite frankly, that should have been worked out. I don't know why they're not worked out, but they're not worked out. But her testimony is going to be, I want to do what's in the best interest of my son while he's still a minor. But at the same instance, I want to take into consideration what he wants to do and his reasonable preference, as well as the impact upon him, both in a medical standpoint and transportation wise. And that's what she's going to testify, Your Honor, to.
Okay. Well, I think you made a point. Don't know why these things haven't resolved. It would seem that you could resolve these particular points, but if not, that's why we're here. So, Mr. DeBriker, you can proceed and call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I may, I got one preliminary question.
Okay.
Will the court be interviewing the child in this case?
No, I will not. Not for parenting time, I won't.
Okay. At this point, I would like to call my client, Marcus Hansen.
Okay.
Marcus, what is your current parenting time arrangement for the summer?
I get 2 3-week periods for a total of 6 weeks.
Do you always exercise those 3 weeks, the 2 separate times?
Yeah, the best I can. There's one time where I think the week got cut short just due to my military training, but otherwise I exercise in 2 3-week periods.
What kind of parenting time do you have during the school year?
I get spring break, and then there's the break during the Christmas time.
What specifically is your break during Christmas?
Oh, I would have to look at the exact verbiage, but it basically depends on when he gets out of school, and then depending on like what half we get, like I have to return him like a few days before he goes back to school, but it's usually split up around Christmas, so he'll fly back. I think it's on the 26th.
Does your son have a fall break or anything like that in school?
He does, but I don't have time during the fall break.
What do you mean you don't have time? You're not awarded parenting time, or what's your
Right.
point? Okay.
I don't have parenting time.
How long is that break?
The fall break, I want to say it's a week. School week.
Do you get Thanksgiving?
I do not.
Have you ever had him for Thanksgiving?
There's only been a couple times throughout his life, but they're not in the parenting order, so I don't get to exercise that.
So what holidays are actually in your parenting time order?
Pretty much Christmas.
How about Father's Day?
No.
Why is it that you don't have any more holidays?
I mean, the biggest factor that I'm aware of is due to the distance in which we've lived. Like we've discussed earlier, I mean, we've lived in different areas, different states. So it's never been as opportune as I would say now, living much closer.
So as far as parenting time in the summer, what would you like to see changed?
I would like to take away the break in between and just have one solid block, just because the having to deal with the transportation in the middle of it, it gets pretty disruptive. Having to plan and coordinate for that. I know it's just disruptive for us, and I've spoken to Colton about it, and he's not a big fan of having to travel back and forth in the middle. So that's how I see it.
Sure. And are you aware of the testosterone shots that was referenced that he takes?
I am aware of it. No, I have not gotten the training on it personally. Haven't had to. However, there's his medical coverage does cover him from out here as well. So there should be plenty of clinics, and I've started to research for them in terms that can actually administer them. So the concern of me doing it is negated, but there are plenty of clinics around here that administer testosterone. It's a fairly routine shot for a lot of people, so it's not uncommon.
And you got those clinics close to your house or no?
Yeah, there's plenty of clinics close to my house, and then there's also the base out here that I go to. So I can, between insurance and the clinics, I can work it out.
So is your going back to Christmas holidays, and holidays, is it your testimony that you guys split Christmas?
Yes.
All right, and that's what you're proposing that you continue to do?
Yes. I just wanted to kind of try and split it more evenly.
What do you mean by that? Is it not even right now?
No, usually it ends up with one person, one of the parents, me or Autumn, getting a very small portion, and then the other parent getting a much bigger portion. And so I'm just kind of looking to get that to be more equitable, especially just for the cost of like travel and stuff during that time. Like, really want to maximize time with Colton and make it more fair for both, just to make it equal.
And what are you proposing for Thanksgiving moving forward?
So I want it to be more equal. So for like this year, I would propose that I would get them December 22nd through the 30th, with that exchange happening on the 30th. And if you look at the calendar, it basically ends up with me and Autumn each getting 8 days.
Are you talking about Christmas still?
Yes.
Okay. And what would you propose for Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving, I mean, we just alternate every other year.
Okay.
And I mean, we'd have to play with the days that he's out of school to make sure he's, getting out of school and back to school, but just alternate that every year.
Same thing with the fall break?
Yeah, I would say that with the fall break. And then if like I have them for Thanksgiving, then Autumn would have them for fall break, and then just switch that every year.
What other holidays would you like to see included?
I mean, there could be any of the holidays throughout the year. I would like the 1 week in a month if possible. And because some of the weekends would fall on that where there's a holiday, not necessarily speaking any major holidays.
Sure. And why is it that you feel like you can exercise the 1 week in a month now?
Well, we are much closer as we've discussed. So the affordability and drivability is there. And I have spoken to Colton, and he has wished to see us more. So that's coming from my perspective. And he is getting older, and I would just like to be able to, now that I'm closer, I'd like to be able to see him more. So there's not much of a break, because the way it is now, we go a few months without seeing him every year. And I just feel like for our relationship that it'd be better to see each other each month if possible, or more holidays.
Sure. Why don't you can you tell us how you guys handle transportation currently?
Currently, again, due to distance that we had, I was paying for the flights, which included airfare and all the fees associated with like being an underage minor or him going unaccompanied. And that's pretty much how it's been. But we weren't close enough to drive until now. So I'm trying to get the drive in there. And I'm looking to meet halfway. There are plenty of really good spots that are pretty much exactly in the middle. And my concern with that is me having to do the drive all the way to Battle Creek. It's a pretty long drive. I think we've all acknowledged that. And to ask me to do it there and back, I feel it's a safety concern. Just having to drive all that distance and all that time, I'd rather be able to split that and make it more safe.
Have you guys ever split the transportation in the past, whether it was in Michigan or another state or whatever it was?
When we both lived in Washington, we lived a good distance apart, and we met at, I wouldn't say it was exactly a halfway spot, but pretty close to, when we both lived in Washington.
And in your mind, why did it change to where you were responsible for the transportation?
Well, she moved out to Michigan, and I shortly after got stationed in Iowa.
And what exactly is the distance between your guys' homes now?
Oh, I think it was like 220 miles or so.
What are your thoughts on the train?
I mean, I've ridden the trains around here, and they've seemed safe to me. It's not a showstopper for me. I was just looking for available options, and that was brought up to me as a good alternative as opposed to flying. So I thought it was a good idea.
Okay, but so in your mind, would the primary method of transportation be by car?
Preferably, yes.
Now, if he needed to fly, who's covering the cost?
I would,
Is that what you're doing now?
yes.
Now, tell me a little bit about your job and how that might impact this weekend for parenting time that you're proposing.
So with my job, I do also have to work 1 week in a month. So I would just ensure that the weekend that I would get would not fall on the same weekend. That way, of course, so I can maximize parenting time and be with Colton. That's the purpose.
So how would Colton's mom know what weekends you were planning to exercise, I guess? Do you have weekends in mind already?
I do have some weekends in mind. So every year, the unit I'm in, like every unit has to publish a weekend schedule because our soldiers that do come in have to provide that to their employers. So it's pretty routine. And we have to have it done before the beginning of every fiscal year that we go by from October to October. So we usually have it the month prior in September. So it helps us plan throughout the year.
Do you guys utilize Our Family Wizard?
Yes.
Is that how you would notify her of what days you're intending, I guess, and methods of transportation?
Right. I would send it through OFW.
Do you guys utilize the calendar function within Our Family Wizard?
It's typically where Autumn posts like his appointments and stuff like that. So that's how it's been used primarily so far.
So if you were to be granted this parenting time schedule that you're looking for, um, would you be using Our Family Wizard to kind of keep her updated if for some reason he had a medical issue, or to update her about the testosterone shots? Or I mean, what would be your plan to make sure that she stays informed?
Yeah, I use Our Family Wizard, and that's what I'd use for everything, all the basic communication. If there's ever an emergency, I would tend to just send a text if it's time sensitive and emergency in nature for Colton, but otherwise Our Family Wizard is primary communication.
So when you've been looking into setting up a clinic in case this were to be granted, just looking at your options for these testosterone shots, are you going to need his insurance information or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, if he has any insurance information for medical, I would need that just to ensure that where I do take him, he's covered by both insurances.
So who actually carries the insurance right now?
Well, I know I carry it for medical and dental, and I believe Autumn covers dental and eyes.
So if Colin were to be with you for 6 weeks straight, you would need that medical information just in case he has a dental or vision issue.
Yeah, I would need that just to ensure that where I take him, I'm taken him to a clinic that's in network and authorized.
Do you not have that information right now?
No,
Is your son driving yet?
not that I'm aware of. I know he said he's practiced once or twice at his other family's house, but other than that, uh, I don't think he drives yet.
Does he have learner's permit?
He does have a learner's permit for what I've been told.
Okay. Did he have it with him the last time he came to your house?
No, we've asked for it, but he's not brought it with him.
Is that something you would like to be a part of, teaching them how to drive?
I'd definitely like to take the opportunity to, have that experience with them. I've talked to him about it. And it's something that we both expressed that we want to do. So it'd just be nice.
I guess as far as, well, I guess, does he bring any ID with him?
Typically, no. We've asked in the past. To my knowledge, the only time he's brought an ID was this last summer on the second 3-week stint. He had his military ID card, but other than that, he usually doesn't have it with him. And he says he's not supposed to have it.
Before I forget, if this court were to order that you guys are to meet halfway for parenting time, where do you think that would be?
There was a police station, I believe it was the Michiana police station. When I looked it up, it was, I believe it was 108 miles exactly for each of us. So it's like right in the middle.
Okay. So with the current schedule and I guess the majority of your parenting time being in the summer, and as you testify, going months at a time without parenting time, do you think that impacts your ability to be a part of his schooling, for example?
Yeah, I mean, because honestly, since he's not here throughout the school year, except for like on the spring break and stuff, like he's on a break, there's not any active stuff going on. So there's really not a whole lot of participation in that aspect. I know like when he's here during the summer, we have him do like these grade books that are good for like in the summer. But that's just like all we do for the most part, because that's when he's here a majority of the time.
Sure. Are you in contact with the school?
I am.
Okay. Does the school keep you informed of IEP meetings or anything like that?
They will now. There was an issue this time. Like I had submitted all my information. I had talked to the school, but I guess what I didn't know and what they weren't tracking at the time is that there was a lag time in between input of the information, and so I wasn't told or informed of the IEP that happened until after the fact.
Okay. So do you think it would be easier if you two just placed everything in our Family Wizard calendar as soon as you find out about these things?
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, in terms of like medical and dental appointments, she utilizes that for those appointments. I would just say that also input stuff for a school like IEPs are just as important on the educational piece.
And you're not asking her to provide you, his report cards or attendance records or whatever that you can get from the school, right?
Correct.
Okay. I suppose I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Banks, any cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Hanson, good morning.
Morning.
What's your actual physical address and where you live? Is that northwest of the city of Chicago?
Yeah, it's a northwest suburb.
And where does Miss Curtis and the child live?
Battle Creek.
And you said that's approximately 220 miles, you think, between the homes?
Yeah, pretty sure that's what it was.
Okay. Your 6 weeks in the summertime this past summer, was that the first time you had 6 weeks with the child?
I believe it was the first time I was able to get the full 3 weeks because, like I said before, there was some stuff with my military that interrupted with it.
Isn't it true that the military schedule is subject to change without notice?
It can be changed, but it does get published. So whenever we have a change to our schedule, we do create a new memo that gets published and just it gets distributed out.
So one of the past orders had reference to your summer training time. Do you still have summer training time, I guess is the question.
Currently, I do not. In the previous units I was in, I was having that. I'm in a fairly different, somewhat unique unit where that is not a current issue.
So you wouldn't have a time during the summer months that you would have to be away from your family?
No, nothing that would get scheduled on a regular basis.
Okay. So you don't have, currently though, you say you've been checking around, you don't have a specific plan as far as his shots are concerned.
As of right now, I do not. I would of course get that solidified if he were to come here for the full block or a 6-week block. And if there's any issues that I had with that, of course, I would not prohibit him from getting a shot. So, however that works out.
So you would drive him back to his mother if you had to?
If I absolutely had to, because it couldn't get done here, I would make sure he gets a shot. Yes,
His mother or the pediatrician?
correct.
Are you aware that Colton's not really a fan of this weekend per month thing?
I'm not aware of that, just based off the conversations I've had with him.
You haven't asked him about it or his preference or what he would like to see happen as far as during the school year?
He's expressed in the past that he would like to see us more. The every weekend or 1 week in a month hasn't been an explicit conversation just because it wasn't something that we were going for in the past. So
Would you agree that that 220 miles could be anywhere from 3.5 to 5 hour travel one way?
yeah, it's possible depending on traffic.
And also if it's during the school year, depending upon weather. Is that correct?
Yeah, weather could be a factor too.
And regardless of what either party's responsibility is as far as meeting halfway or going somewhere, that means that the focus, which should be on the child's going to be in the car during a 48-hour weekend, anywhere between 8 and 10 hours.
I mean, it's possible.
And you think that's in his best interest?
I think him being able to see us throughout the year is definitely important. I know the travel isn't always the best. It's not ideal, but I think it's a small cost to still be able to see family, and it's worth it.
It's a small cost for Colton.
Right.
Would you agree that if the court considers this weekend per month, regardless of Colton's wishes, if the court orders it, if you see this child, would you agree during the school year, would you agree that during months that you have the child that you wouldn't exercise an additional weekend during that month?
Correct. Yeah, it would just be on the months where I don't already have them.
So if we, for instance, you've mentioned the fall break, are you aware that that's only 4 days?
Yeah, it was about a week. Yeah. Well, school week.
So is the fall break separate from Thanksgiving break?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
Is that two different things?
Yeah, it'd be two different things, and so we would split them 2 different ways.
Okay, so every year, well, I say every year, there's 2 years left,
Right,
basically. You agree he's going to be 16 in February, right?
Correct.
So every year you would see the child in November, right?
Well, that's the plan. I would see him.
Do we know when the fall break is in relationship to the Thanksgiving break?
I mean, I'd have to look back at the calendar to get exact dates.
Okay, so let's just presume for a moment they're both in November or somewhere around that time period. That would mean that November you wouldn't have a weekend, right?
Correct. It would just be the
And
break.
December you wouldn't have a weekend, correct? Because it's Christmas.
Correct.
And you still want to have every spring break.
I would like every spring break, but I'm willing to go every other spring break.
So you would be willing to give up one of your, there's only 2 spring breaks left before he's 18. Would you be willing to give up one of those spring breaks if you have these 1 weekend per month?
I'd be willing to do that.
Okay. So if you had spring break, that's generally March, you wouldn't have him that month either, correct?
Correct.
And am I correct that you're asking for Father's Day?
If I can, that would be great.
Do you know when he gets out of school this year?
I don't have the exact date.
Do you have a guesstimate, I should ask?
I mean, not really, like May, June timeframe, but
First week of June sound about right?
sounds about right.
You aware that Father's Day is June the 16th in 2024?
Sounds good to me.
So you could probably exercise your Father's Day during your parenting time in the summertime if you chose that week, correct?
It's possible.
You've provided all the transportation for the last 5 years, correct?
Correct.
And you agree that if you elect to do flight, that you'll cover that expense?
Correct.
As far as the school in OFW is concerned, is it your only request that you be informed by Miss Curtis of any IEP meeting?
Yeah,
Oh, via OFW?
correct.
You're in contact with the school system, though?
I am.
Do you have Power School app?
I do.
Okay. And you have reasonable access, I'm not sure how, email possibly to his teachers?
I do. Yeah, I have that figured out now. That was one of the issues that I had for this previous IEP, but I'm in contact with the teacher.
So as far as this weekend during the school year is concerned, do you know what time he gets out of school?
Not the exact time, no.
Estimate?
Around 2.
If I told you it was 2:50, would that ring a bell maybe?
That could be right.
So your request then is for him to get out of school at basically 3 o'clock on Friday, and then gather up all his stuff if he hasn't already. His mom drive him 2 hours to. You said, did you mean Mishawaka?
That might be right. I can go through my notes and get the address and name if you want, but I thought it's like Michiana.
Okay, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm a former Hoosier, so that's the only reason I think I know it. But if it was Mishawaka or wherever you're saying here, halfway, he would be there by 5 or 6. He's getting back to your home by 9 o'clock at night on Friday.
It could potentially. It's I've made the drive before and it's been much quicker than that.
Okay.
I was lucky and didn't fight the traffic, but
Well, if he's coming through at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he's going to hit the traffic, isn't he?
I mean, it's possible. I don't want to get too much in the weeds to it, but going that direction at that time, usually you fight through some traffic, but not all, because usually it's leaving Chicago, not going into it.
All right. So let's say and you're an hour behind, right? I mean, you're on
Correct.
Central
Yeah,
Time. So in a good case scenario, he gets there at 8 o'clock at night. Then you want him to get back up and leave when on Sunday? Noon? Because you're an hour behind, which will be noon your time, 1 o'clock our time.
it could be around noon, sometime after lunch. Yeah.
So that doesn't leave any appreciable time before the two of you do it, does it?
I mean, I would say a good solid day with, me and his brother and sister. I mean, obviously I would want more, but I still think some contact is good.
Nothing prevents you from, there's a provision in one of our orders that allows you to see him anytime you're in Michigan, doesn't it?
Right. And I've asked in the past and was told that he was busy. So, I mean, I've tried.
When exactly? How many times?
Well, since he's lived there now in Michigan, just the one time.
Okay. So nothing prevents you from coming to Michigan and seeing him on a weekend other than arranging it, correct?
Right. And if I had him on the weekends, it wouldn't explicitly mean that we're going to always be at my house. Like, we could do something in Michigan to maximize time. The options are there.
Yeah. But you said you didn't want to drive all the way to Michigan.
Well, as a set standard, I think that meeting halfway is best.
Okay, isn't it, you testified under direct exam that you claim that you don't have her dental and vision insurance information. That's not true. You have that. Isn't that correct?
She's never given it to me, and I've asked her.
That's not what I'm asking you. You have it though. Isn't that correct?
No.
So you haven't gotten it elsewhere otherwise?
No.
Contacting the insurance companies directly and going through EOBs and that sort of thing?
I mean, I've gone through and gotten like the financial stuff from places, but they don't give me like her personal information.
There's been an issue with that in the past, hasn't there? You utilizing her personal information or someone in your home calling and posing as my client to doctor's offices or dental offices or vision places?
No, and I think that was a miscommunication and different from what happened from what you're suggesting.
Isn't it true that the EOBs that you receive, the explanation of benefit statements that you receive, have all of her information on it?
I don't think it has all of her information, no.
Okay.
I would have to go back and look at what's on it, but
You don't provide any routine care to them, correct? You're not the one that takes them to the doctor, dentist, or the optometrist during the school year?
No.
You're basically wanting the information to, for what purpose?
well, just because if he is in my care, there's been a couple times throughout the years where it would have been appropriate to take him in, for this or that, and I was offering to do it since he was in my care like during the summer, so during a more extended time. And
For what purpose? What kind of care?
well, there's one time where like he had a bad cavity on a tooth, or even like during this last time during the summer, he was having some complaints about his eyes and his glasses, and so I was looking to get like an annual exam for that and get his eyes checked because it sounded like he potentially needed a new prescription for glasses.
That's something that would be handled by my client, isn't that correct?
It can be, but
I mean, she's a custodial parent, right?
yes.
Hasn't she requested for you to, in the past, to sign a custodial parent release form?
She did.
And why won't you sign that?
Well, there was some things that I was researching about it, and I informed her that I was looking it up. And then when I did go to fill it out, it had, from when I was doing it, informed me that she had already submitted one. And so I didn't keep going with it because it sounded like she had already submitted one.
How would she have submitted one if you didn't sign it?
Apparently there's a process for it. I would have to look at the details of it, but from what I was told before is that it was already submitted. So,
Isn't it true that your reluctance to sign the custodial parent release form is you didn't want her to have your personal information?
it wasn't about my personal information. It was about apparently the ability to change information, and that's what I was trying to look up at the time.
Okay. So when the child's in your care, though, you utilize your own insurance, don't you, for him?
I mean, I do have my insurance for him, so if need be, that'd be obviously the only one I can give, and I would utilize it.
So you don't need her information to have him treated for some emergency or something like that when you have him anyway, correct?
Not for an emergency, because you should be able to take him anywhere.
Okay. I don't believe I have anything further, Your Honor.
Okay. Sir, I have one question for you. When you were saying you wanted the 1 weekend per month, does your schedule allow you to take a particular weekend? For instance, if you were to get, let's say, the first full weekend of each month, would you be able to do that? Or would that be something that would interfere with your schedule and wouldn't allow it in a particular month?
So as of right now, they're actually typically on the first weekend, but there's not a general order that we have to follow for that. So it would be hard to navigate that per se, because sometimes it does change. It could be the second or third week.
Okay, so but it's usually the first weekend.
As of right now, Your Honor, but it's not. It doesn't have to always be that way. It's not like a written rule that it has to be.
Okay. Okay, Mr. DeBriker, any redirect?
Just very quickly, if I may, Marcus. So, do you get federal holidays off? MLK, President's Day, things like that.
I do.
So, could that potentially be a 3-day weekend for you and Colton?
Yes.
And theoretically, if you guys were to meet at 5 p.m., he could get home at 9. He could get home at 7, right?
Correct.
I think that's all I needed to clarify.
Okay, Mr. Banks, anything else?
I guess when he's saying, Your Honor, I'm sorry, strike that. Mr. Hanson, when you're saying the first weekend of the month, are you saying that that's the weekend you can't ever exercise parenting time? Or are you saying that that is the weekend for the most part you would exercise parenting time?
So as right now with the current schedule, that's the weekend that I can't do it. For the most
Cannot.
part. Correct.
Okay. So when would my client know what the weekend is on the month where you don't have the child for another vacation or parenting time? Before October 1st of each year, you would lay out an entire school year of those chosen weekends?
Yes.
And what happens if aren't those subject to, isn't your schedule subject to change?
It's possible, but it's not typical.
So would you agree that if you're not available on a weekend that you've chosen, that the weekend that you would advise my client and the weekend would then be waived?
If we can't work it out to a different weekend, I mean, I would prefer to be able to move it if possible.
You would agree that the weekend would not be exercised if you're not available?
If I'm not available and I can't make it work that month, then yes.
And the question for Mr. Broiker was about if you wanted to meet at 5. If you met at 5, you could be home, he could be home at your home by 7. You realize that if it was 5 p.m., that's not going to work for the most part. Are you saying 5 your time or 5 Michigan time?
Well, I would be picking him up at, I guess, around 5 Michigan time. And then I'd have to drive back and hit that hour threshold, I guess, for the timeline or the time zone. So it would be, I'm trying to do the math in my head.
If he gets out of school at roughly 3 o'clock, would you agree that 5 o'clock is not a viable time?
I mean, for me, I can make it work. I guess it's hard. I don't know typically what her schedule is. So.
All right. I have nothing further.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. DeBriker, any additional witnesses?
Just the opposing party, Miss Curtis.
Okay,
I'll make it
so,
brief.
so you're saying you wish to question Ms. Curtis?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. DeBriker.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Curtis, how often does Colton get those testosterone shots again?
Once a month,
Okay. How long has he been getting those?
year and a half, 2 years.
And when exactly did you start administering those yourself?
An exact time frame, I cannot specifically tell you. I would say probably within the first six months.
Okay. And did they, I guess, instruct you on how to start doing that at home?
They did during the visits.
Okay. They just did that at the doctor's office, or did they send you to a class or something? How did that work?
At the doctor's office.
How many visits did it take for you to, I guess, for the doctors to be comfortable with you administering this at home?
A specific number I cannot guarantee.
Okay. Were there multiple doctor visits where you had to be taught on how to do it?
Correct. I went to multiple.
Okay. But if you didn't feel like doing it for whatever reason, could you still take him to the doctor and have him do it?
For an additional cost. Correct.
Okay. Is there any reason why Marcus couldn't take him to the doctor to get that administered in Illinois?
It's a kind of like a controlled substance in the sense that you cannot pick it up, and it's specifically sent to a single place. And then in order to transfer, it would be complicated, if even possible.
Okay. Have you looked into whether or not it was possible for any reason?
No, because I'm not familiar with anything down there.
Sure. So whether or not it's difficult to get it transferred, is that just speculation on your part?
I know that when I moved it from one mire to the other, it took a month and a half to do that, even within the same channel, because they weren't positive it could be transferred at all.
Okay. So being that it's December now, don't you think Marcus could figure that out prior to June when summer parenting time starts?
I can't speak on how he would figure things out.
I can appreciate that. You've heard his testimony regarding the holiday time he's looking for. Are you in agreement with his proposal?
He was not specific on holiday time, and as far as Christmas, no. I do think it's important for both families to be able to exercise Christmas time with Colton, given their minimal at best. And both families, we have children, that it would be nice for each child to get the experience of having time with their brother over the holidays. So I would like to see it continue to stay on the 26th for that purpose.
Okay. I mean, I agree with you. It's probably important for him to get both families in, but Marcus's proposal were for you guys to split it equally. You're saying you don't want to follow that.
I do not. I would like to follow what has been previously done for as long as Colton has been
Sure.
within the time frame that it is.
What about alternating Thanksgiving here on out? Are you in agreement with that or no?
Yes.
What about fall break and alternating that?
Yes.
What about, let's say, Memorial Day weekends and alternating those kind of holidays, Easter, spring breaks? What are your thoughts on that kind of holiday time?
If that's what the court would like to see happen. We've never had a schedule like that, and I've never looked at a calendar to actually assess it, I guess.
Let me back up real quick. So just to be clear, on the summer parenting time, you would like to see it stay how it is, the 2 separate 3-week periods. Is that right?
Yes.
Just want to be clear. In transportation, regardless of whether or not it's for the weekend parenting time, summer parenting time, holiday parenting time, you want Marcus to drive to Battle Creek to get Calhoun, correct?
If he chooses to drive, I mean, that's his prerogative, I suppose.
Okay.
I don't know how it would work, although either way. As far as traffic
Okay.
and time for Colton,
So you're not willing to meet him halfway if he's driving?
I'll do that if that's what Judge Kirkham would like to see. Absolutely.
Okay, but is that something you're willing to agree to right now?
No.
And then the other methods of transportation, I guess, that would be available to Colton, would it be just car and flying? I just want to be clear where you're coming from with that.
Car and flying, I'm not comfortable with the train, given the lack of security measures.
When Marcus does exercise his parenting time, do you send Colton with his IDs and driver's permit, things like that?
His ID went last time, his permit did not.
Do you have any problem with the permit going there?
The permit is signed legally by me currently, to where I'm responsible for any accident that is incurred while he is driving.
So you don't want him to have his driver's permit when he's visiting Marcus?
No, I want Colton comfortable enough to drive. He's not expressed that he's comfortable with it. So I don't want him pressured into thinking he has to drive.
Okay. What does that have to do with you actually sending the driver's permit?
It does not, other than I'm financially responsible for anything that happens while he is driving. And he's not comfortable.
So are you opposed? So strike that. Have there been times in the past where you don't send his military ID either?
There was the one time he requested it, and I did not bring my wallet to the airport, so I could not send it.
Has Marcus asked you throughout Family Wizard for you to send the driver's permit?
Yes.
And what has been your response?
I do not recall.
Did you respond?
I do not recall.
I'm not sure this is properly before the court, Your Honor. I don't remember anything in the motion asking for military ID, or maybe I'm wrong. It was 20 pages long, but I don't think any of this line of questioning is appropriate as far as this goes. It's never been, I don't think it's part of it.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I think I did bring that up in my motion, but nonetheless, I was just ready to move on, I guess, what's set aside.
Okay, let's focus on the salient points for today's hearing.
I actually have no further questions.
Okay. Mr. Banks, any direct examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Ms. Curtis, isn't it true that you're aware of Colton's preference as far as this one weekend per month parenting time is concerned?
Yes.
And is it true that he would prefer not to
I have to object. This is just calling for hearsay.
Sustained.
Ms. Curtis, what do you think about the 1 weekend per month? What's your idea about that? What's your position on that?
I think I'd like to do what Colton would, where Colton is comfortable and what's in his best interest as far as being in a car for so long, for quite so many miles.
That's a nominal amount of time when it comes down to it, isn't it, on a weekend when he's actually there?
It could be in the week, in depending on the weekend.
You would like, regardless of where the court orders the exchange to occur, you'd like that to be at a police facility, sheriff's department, something like that, correct?
Yes.
The 6 weeks in the summertime, you're not asking that that be reduced. You're just asking it to be still in 2 chunks, correct?
Yes.
You stated that it took a month and a half just to be able to transfer the prescription between Meyer pharmacies, correct?
Correct.
And you have no idea what's going to occur if you had to try to transfer it between Michigan and Illinois?
Correct.
Are you aware of what kind of an effect this would have upon the child if he were to miss one of the injections?
Yes.
And what is that?
Colton's body will not consistently progress with the testosterone. And personally, from my perspective, when he gets towards the end of it, he tends to get a little bit more temperamental and moody.
Okay. You've been questioned about Christmas, correct? The Christmas vacation?
Correct.
How long is this Christmas vacation where the exchange on the 26th of December occurs? How long has that been going on?
I think it was the second order from this court.
Okay, so 5 years?
Roughly, yes.
Okay, so there's been Christmas vacations where you've had less time with the minor child, correct?
Yes.
And there's been Christmas vacations where you have had more time with the minor child, correct?
Yes.
This particular Christmas, because of the way it's laid out, does Mr. Hanson have Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and return on the 26th?
Yes.
So he has that entire holiday, correct?
Yes.
But because of the fact of the way the school schedule goes, you actually have more of the remainder of the Christmas vacation, correct?
Yes.
You would nonetheless still like to see Mr. Hanson continue to have Christmas Eve, Christmas Day return on the 26th this year, 2023.
Yes.
Do you have plans in place already for this Christmas, which is 20 days from now?
Yes.
And what kind of plans are those?
I postponed Christmas with my child till the day later, and it involves my family, my soon-to-be spouse's family, and then I have plans with my grandparents who are not local.
Okay. So if it were changed, those plans would all have to either be redone or you would just miss out, or Colton would miss out on family time. Is that correct?
Yes.
So do you think it's fair and equitable just to continue the Christmas vacation schedule that's been in place for the last several number of years?
Yes.
2 Christmases left, correct?
3 this year and then 2 more.
3 Christmases left before he turns 18 in 2026, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you've been questioned about you don't have a problem with alternating Thanksgiving?
Correct.
And do you know how long the fall break is?
I think it's 4 days.
How does that align with Thanksgiving? I mean, is it before Thanksgiving? Is it in December? When's the fall break?
I want to say it's in October, and then so there's one in October, November, then December. They get breaks from school.
Okay. When did Colton begin school this year, prior to Labor Day or after Labor Day?
He started before Labor Day.
All right. So you don't have a problem with alternating Thanksgiving and fall break, meaning if you had fall break, he would have Thanksgiving. If he had fall break, he would have Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And you've heard Mr. Hanson testify, correct?
Yes.
do you have a problem with, if the court orders a weekend per month, that it be only in the months that that Mr. Hansen doesn't have the child anyway?
Correct.
In other words, if he had fall break and it was in October, he would not get a weekend that month.
Right.
If he had Christmas break in December, he would not get a weekend in December.
Correct.
If he had Thanksgiving in November, he would not get a weekend in November.
Correct.
And are you in agreement to alternating spring break?
Yes.
You have another minor child now, correct?
I do.
What's his age?
He'll be 2 in a few days.
If your obligation as far as school is concerned and OFW is limited to letting Mr. posting on OFW on the calendar to Mr. Hansen when he has a IEP meeting, are you in agreement with that?
The only issue I see is the school was going to do 2 separate IEP meetings, one with myself and then one with Marcus separately, which is what the school told me at the beginning of the year. So I don't necessarily see the purpose in me putting mine on there and him to put his on there, essentially.
Would you be made aware that there's 2 different ones if there's 2 different IEPs in the future?
I don't believe they would notify me of the second one.
Okay. So he should be able to find that out from the school himself, correct?
Correct.
As far as the medical cards are concerned, you cover him for what? When I say him, I'm saying Colton.
Medical, dental, and vision.
Would there be any reason to send your medical card to Mr. Hansen for the time Colton's down there in Illinois?
The only reason would be maybe in the event of an emergency, but we wouldn't need it any other way. All his routine care is here.
Have there been issues in the past with Mr. Hansen obtaining your personal information, personal insurance information?
Not specifically him, but his wife.
And what was that?
Medical or not dental information.
In what way?
She misrepresented herself to the dental office, and excuse me, because I don't remember the specifics as to what she was trying to obtain.
Okay, she misrepresented her ID?
Yeah, of who she was.
Claimed she was you?
Correct.
You don't feel comfortable giving up that information to him?
No.
Does Mr. Hansen have medical insurance on the child?
Yes.
And he could use that when he had him in his care, correct?
Correct.
Do you know whether Mr. Hansen has your information already on your vision and dental insurance on Colton?
My dental plan was listed on billing statements he's received.
Okay.
Vision, I'm not positive.
What time does Colton get out of school?
Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, he's out at 2:50 in the event that they're not half days. And then Wednesdays are typically early releases, which are 1:40.
Okay, so on Fridays, it would be 2:50.
Correct.
Does he ride the bus?
He does not.
Okay. So what time would you be able to get back to your home if you had to pick up anything?
He typically is not out of the building for at least 10 minutes, so I wouldn't even leave the school till 2:50, which means I roughly would not get home, depending on traffic and the children that are also leaving the school, till about 3:30.
Okay. So if the court ordered this once per month weekend for Colton on the months that Mr. Hansen doesn't have him, and you had to go someplace 108 miles away, because they're 108, 110 miles away, what do you think would be a reasonable time that you would try to be there by?
If I'm driving 2.5 hours, I probably wouldn't get there here till 5:30, maybe 6, depending on what traffic I hit going that specific direction. I don't travel that way very often.
And if the court ordered this one weekend per month on the months he doesn't have the minor child, what time is a reasonable time to have him back home on Sundays?
Back home as in within my home or within my care?
back to your care so you can get them home?
Probably by 5 my time, our time here in Michigan.
Okay. So the child would have to leave sometime around noon on Sunday, go through hours in the car to get back to you, to somewhere in between to get back home.
Presumably, yes.
I don't think I have anything further.
Yeah.
Oh, I do have one question. I'm sorry, Your Honor. Have you attempted to get a parental consent form in the past? Or I forget what it's called right off the top of my bat.
Yes.
And what was the purpose of getting that for?
To sort out any billing issues I was having with his dental provider.
And was Mr. Hanson willing to provide that to you?
No, he's still not signed it to date.
So were you able to process it without his signature?
No, absolutely not.
So you need that in order to work out any disputes on insurance payments and that sort of thing?
Correct.
Do you know why he wouldn't return it?
Specifically, no.
Okay. Oh, the other thing is too, you work where?
I work for Detroit Metropolitan Airport.
Okay. What do you do there?
I work security for TSA.
Okay. What's your schedules like? What's your schedule for that?
I have a 3:45 a.m. start.
Okay. And when's the day end?
My day ends at 12:15.
Okay. Would that affect your ability on Fridays on these exchanges or on any exchange for any holiday or summer, any of that kind of stuff to get the child if you had to drive halfway?
It would be likely substantially hard physically and mentally to stay awake for that drive there and back, given the late time frames.
Do you work weekends too?
I do.
How often?
Every weekend until
That's
our bid changes.
Oh, okay, so part of your regular schedule is the weekend.
Correct.
And so if you had to pick up Colton at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time somewhere in northern Indiana, that would likewise be on a date that you had to work. A Sunday you had to work, correct?
Yes.
I don't think I have anything further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. DeBreker, anything else?
Yes, Your Honor, very briefly. Ms. Curtis, wouldn't you agree that most medical providers only need like a policy number and group number as far as insurance information is concerned?
Wouldn't I agree? No, they likely need social security numbers, names, and all of those things, along with whatever you have additional information required for their forms.
So is it your impression that Marcus is asking for your social security numbers or whoever else is on the policy and all that stuff, or is he just asking for Colton's specific information?
Marcus is asking for the policy information.
Okay. So what safety concerns as far as your personal information would exist if you guys were to both just share that information on Our Family Wizard, what your policy numbers are, and things of that nature?
They already have all my other information, and his wife has misrepresented herself in the past to obtain information regarding to my policies.
Okay.
Or
but
bills.
why can't you guys just post that on Our Family Wizard? You guys have conflicted testimony. He said he doesn't have it. You're testifying that he has it. Is there a reason why we can't just put it all in one document where you guys can share that information? Not personal information, but the policy numbers.
The conflicting information is that he said I never gave it to him. The information he's saying he had, or what I heard, was he potentially could have it on forms that he received from his providers.
Sure. And insurance policies can change, right?
They do, based off your choice.
This consent form, when did you provide that, Marcus?
Months ago. A specific time frame I cannot. Would have been before I moved here or just after I moved here. So May.
Okay, did you follow up with Marcus after not getting his signature?
Marcus said he was going to do it, and so therefore I never followed back up with it.
Okay. Isn't it true that he asked you through Our Family Wizard if you needed anything further and asked for another copy of the form?
It's a link, so
But do you recall receiving that message?
I don't specifically recall. I get lots of messages.
Regarding providing transportation, don't you have a support system that might be able to provide transportation for Colton if needed?
And not specifically for those time frames.
The timeframes, what timeframes?
The Mondays, Sundays, or Sunday, Monday, or Fridays,
Okay.
given my current family's arrangements.
And getting notice, September the year prior, you wouldn't be able to work that out at all.
My schedules are as they are. The only way to work that out would be requiring me to take time off from work to accommodate these potential timeframes.
Your mother provides a lot of childcare, doesn't she?
No,
Okay. Does she ever provide transportation for him, for Colton?
she's picked him up from school. Maybe a handful of times.
Regarding these IEP meetings, you testified that you were told that there's 2 IEP meetings. Who told you this?
What is her last name? I don't remember her last name. She's the head IEP lady for school.
And you're saying that she told you specifically that there will be 2 IEP meetings?
That she would set it up as if there would be 2, one for him and one for myself.
Have they ever done that?
Specifically, no, but the school asked at the beginning of school year.
And how does that work in your mind in a practical sense? If there's 2 IEPs, what if decisions need to be made? Doesn't it make more sense to just have one that you both can attend?
Given the timeframes and what's available for either parent, it just provides for us each to be able to speak to the school.
Okay. But isn't it true that this most recent IEP meeting, you did make changes?
I did not. I followed the instructions of the teachers and the input from Colton in that meeting.
And did you notify Marcus at all?
Of what?
The change in the IEP plan?
I have yet to receive an IEP to even give notification of it.
But it's true that you agreed to changes in his speech therapy.
He did not have speech therapy.
What changes were made at this IEP?
Your Honor, this goes way beyond the scope of my cross.
Well, it does. So limit yourself, Mr. DeBreaker.
Sure. I think I got my point across. I'll move on. Ms. Kersey, you also testified that you also have other children to worry about, correct?
Correct.
And you're aware that Colton has other siblings in Marcus's house, right?
Correct.
Wouldn't it benefit Colton to see his siblings more?
Would it benefit Colton to see his siblings more?
Yeah.
I mean, it would provide for them to be able to see him more. I don't know how the benefit other than contact.
And even if Marcus isn't able to exercise a weekend and has to waive it as he was asked before, why wouldn't Colton still go to his house to spend time with his siblings?
Colton has expressed to me his
Objection. I can't let hearsay come in.
Sustain.
Let me ask this a different way, if I may. Are there any safety concerns for Colton to go to Marcus's house even if Marcus isn't there?
none that I'm aware of.
Okay. And you think it's important that Colton does have a bond with all of his siblings on both sides, right?
Correct.
How many days for this Christmas? Because you were asked about the holiday schedule for this Christmas. How many days does Marcus have?
He gets in Friday, and I want to say till Tuesday.
And I'm sorry, you moved back to Michigan from Florida, correct?
Correct.
And the primary method of transportation for Colton's been by plane, right?
Correct.
How long is that flight?
From
Detroit to Florida, or I strike that. Where, I guess, what airports did Colton fly out of prior to you moving back to Michigan?
I'm going to object as to relevance, Your Honor.
Mr. DeBriker, what's your response?
Well, the relevance is she was asked about the Christmas parenting time schedule, and I think the relevance is, and also the detriment to the child for being in a car for 3 to 4 hours. And I think it's relevant to know that this child has spent just as much time on planes going back and forth for minimal parenting time.
Okay, well, maybe ask her that question as opposed to what airport, et cetera. You could ask her the
Sure.
time the child
Sure.
spends.
I guess in the past, how long have his plane flights been, Miss Curtis? Colton?
Depending on which plane flight Marcus chose, and far as layovers and things like that, or weather, he's been in an airport for a whole day at times due to the locations in which he was flown in and out of.
And that was even with, for Christmas time, where you guys kind of have less time year to year.
That was actually during the summer in which he had a 24-hour period. This is why.
And you've driven from Florida to Michigan before with Colton, haven't you?
I moved back, yes.
I have no further questions.
Okay, Mr. Banks, anything else?
Those trips that you've been questioned about from Florida to Washington or Iowa or whatever by airplane, those were for either Christmas time, spring break, or summer parenting time, right, Miss Curtis?
Correct.
Those weren't for 40 hours, which is what these weekend proposal is for, correct?
Correct.
So your son spending 10 hours in the car over a period of less than 48 hours is a lot. Isn't that a lot different than for 6 weeks in the summertime?
Correct.
And the Christmas break that's been brought up again, if you continue with the same schedule that you had for the next 3 Christmases, this one and the following 2 before he turns 18, next year, Mr. Hanson will logically get more of the Christmas break than you do, correct?
Typically, that's how it's worked.
And then you'll get Christmas Day and Christmas Eve and that sort of thing next year.
Correct.
All right. So you just want to keep that in place for these last couple of Christmases, correct?
Correct.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Any additional witnesses, Mr. DeBriker?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Banks, any witnesses?
No, Your Honor. I'm going to rest on my client's testimony that I took in cross-examination. I don't need to recall her.
Okay, thank you. Looks like that concludes the proofs in this matter. Mr. DeBriker, wish to make a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll do my best to keep this brief. I think at the end of the day, the court understands, the disagreements here. My client is looking for extra parenting time, but quite frankly, this isn't going to alter the established custodial environment. He's quite in line with Shade v. Wright in that he's looking for a change in the duration or the frequency of parenting time. This move back, both parties moved, and I would argue that does constitute proper cause change in circumstances to even look at modifying parenting time, and we do think that it's in the child's best interest to do so. My clients testify that he believes that this is what the child wants. She testifies not, so I guess that's just conflicting. There's no reason to believe that my client can't handle testosterone shots. It's like you said, it is a very common thing to have to seek medical attention once a month. There's plenty of time to work those things out. He also testified that he's asked to see Colton in the past when he does come to Michigan, and just to be denied. Also, in my experience, Your Honor, I've never heard of 2 IEPs being conducted, not unless there's severe issues of domestic violence and things of that nature. Schools just don't have the money to do that, nor do they have the time. And these IEP meetings do require collaboration between the school and the parents to make these decisions. It's important for everyone to be involved. And I don't understand why there would be any objection to them having just one IEP. And I think that's a minor issue at the end of the day as it pertains to this overall case. But I think that just kind of adds into the unreasonableness here. There is no reason why Ms. Curtis shouldn't be meeting my client halfway, no matter what the parenting time schedule is. There is no reason why they both shouldn't be made aware of the IEP meetings. There is no reason why they shouldn't be sharing medical insurance information. It's also been my experience in the past that a lot of insurance companies will require all insurances to be billed regardless. And that's, I don't know, that's kind of over my head, but that's not unusual either. I don't see the issue with it. At the end of the day, my client did reiterate the schedule he's looking for. We do think that this will allow not only extra parenting time, but increase the quality of parenting time between my client and the child. And I think that's important. Mr. Banks is right. There's not much time left before this child does turn 18. And I think it's important to establish that kind of relationship while we still can. I mean, they do have a great relationship as it is. But, with my client being in the military and the distance between the parties, this kind of schedule has just never been practical. And at this point it is, and there's really no reason not to do it. She receives 80% of the holidays. He doesn't even get Father's Day. That's a problem. And for those reasons, we would just ask that my client be granted that extra month, regardless of whether or not he's actually able to exercise it. I understand he testified that he'd be willing to waive, but in my personal opinion, I think it's important for Colton to have a relationship with his siblings in mom's house and dad's house. He clearly gets that time in mom's house. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if one weekend out of this year he went and just spent time with his stepmom and his siblings. For that reason, we would just ask that the court grant our motion to modify the parenting time schedule, order mom to meet my client halfway if they are going to drive, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's somewhat ironic that this is being posed as somehow my client being unreasonable, and all we've got to do is revert back to us having to have a hearing to change domicile to Michigan because Mr. Hansen wouldn't agree to it, just for purposes of whatever reason. So that's number one. Number two, the holiday schedule that's in place, again, it's posed as if my client denied him parenting time on the holidays. These were all holidays that were, the schedule was an order of the court because these parties lived thousands of miles apart in the past. This isn't because my client has said, oh, you can't have them and this, that, and the other. So to try to pose my client as being unreasonable, that's not what's here. We just haven't been able to sort out these details. And quite frankly, this motion's 30 pages long and these details are 2 pages of it, 20 pages long, whatever it is. As far as the summer months, my client's testified that she doesn't want to cut down on his weeks with the child. It's just that she would like to have him home in between there. So after 3 weeks so that she can have this injection done. And if we order it and then we have to go through trying to make it so that Mr. Hansen can give this injection, and what happens if he can't do it? That's the concern that we have. I guess he will have to drive back to the state of Michigan with the child to have it done. I suppose that's one alternative. If that's his responsibility to bring the child all the way back to the pediatrician for it, and it's only 2 summers to have this done, what objection, I guess, can we have? As far as the holidays are concerned, again, you heard my client testify, Your Honor. She's agreed to alternate Thanksgiving, agreed to alternate fall break, agreed to alternate spring break, I might add. And I think Father's Day falls in the summertime, to be quite honest, after he's out of school, at least. The calendar says June 16th. So if these, and Mr. Hansen has testified that he agrees that any month he has the child, he doesn't want that 1 weekend per month. So we may be talking about only a couple of months. I don't know. That's not where this started, though. And Mr. DeBroeker said, well, the parties testified, Mr. Hansen testified that he's aware that this is what Colton wants, this extra time. But Mr. Hansen didn't testify. That's not an accurate statement. Mr. Hansen testified that, yes, Colton's expressed his desire to have extra time, but he's also stated, I've never spoken to him specifically about an additional weekend during the school year. So he's not talked to him. He hasn't taken into consideration. And of course, the child's reasonable preference. If the court's not going to interview him, that's the prerogative of the court. And obviously it's hearsay what my client says, but that's our position. The child's reasonable preference is I don't want to go there. during the school year, just simply because of the time. And it's the child's right to parenting time. I think that gets lost in the weeds sometime. Not necessarily, that's the paramount right, is the child's right to parenting time. As far as these other issues, the transportation, my client has made it clear, if the court orders that she has to drive halfway, she has to drive halfway. And it's just the way it has to be, I suppose. Mr. Hanson has provided the transportation in the past. The parties are closer. If that's what this has to be, it has to be. We have to set a point where it should occur at, and it certainly be with law enforcement because of issues in the past. I think it's going to be during the school year. If the court orders that weekend per month, I think it's going to be a very big burden upon the minor child to have a few hours of parenting time and be in the car all that time for a few hours of parenting time. It's not apples to apples when we're comparing him going to his dad's house for 3 weeks at a time or a week at a time, or spring break, which now Mr. Hanson's willing to also alternate. As far as the Christmas break is concerned, Your Honor, this has been in place for years and years and years now. One year they get more, the next year they get less. Why upset the apple cart at this point when that's been what the parties are used to? And my client has planned accordingly, at least for this year. The IEP meetings, I've heard of separate IEP meetings a kabillion times over the last 36 years of doing this, where the parties have issues getting along and they want separate meetings, they ask for it. But why do we have to have court involvement on this? Why does Mr. Hanson have to have my client spoon feed him what goes in at the school when all he has to do is get off his hands and talk to the school himself, which now he says I have, and that we've straightened that out. So why is that even an issue about what's published on the OFW from my client? She gives him the appointments for doctors, dentists, vision. There's not a problem there. As far as the insurance cards are concerned, if it's just the policy number, it's one thing, but that's not what's gone on in the past. This court's heard the testimony, and I might add, without any contrary testimony, any contrary testimony being presented from the party who is alleged to have been trying to use my client's identity to get info from these offices, it is normal to exchange insurance information. If it's limited to no personal identifiers other than the policy number, which apparently Mr. Hanson already has. And it's, again, kind of ironic that he won't sign a simple form for my client, but he wants her to turn over information to him. So I think the court gets the dynamic of the interaction between these parties. So I think leaving the schedule as it is, Your Honor, with additions of holidays is sufficient because that gives him more consistent contact with the minor child. Again, I think the 1 weekend per month in those months where he doesn't have the minor child is more of a burden on the child than really should be necessary. That's all I have, Your Honor. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Mr. DeBreker, anything else?
Well, Your Honor, I other than the assuming facts not entered in today as evidence in that closing statement, there are several things I disagree with that was said. I mean, we want to talk about not being able to bring up, my client's mom not being able to be around the kid because that was already litigated. It sounds like this issue with getting personal information was brought up in the past. It is no bearing on anything right now. Wasn't going to waste the court's time dealing with that issue because I do think it's a non-issue. I think it's ridiculous, quite frankly. And yeah, we are sitting here saying that there are parts to this that my client is willing to work out and has been able to. At the end of the day, not meeting somebody for transportation is a problem. And there's just a lot going on here, Your Honor. Obviously, there's a lot of history here. At the end of the day, my client they're trying to make it seem as if my client has always provided 100% of the transportation. That's not the case. You heard my client testify that in Washington, they lived hours apart then, and they handled it just fine. It wasn't until the parties moved out of different states that this happened. I think this was 4 to 5 years ago now. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's been in the past. It's not in the child's best interest right now, and it's not fair to my client. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll ask both the attorneys just clarification for the record. There was the underpinning in this case about the change of domicile and not agreeing and agreeing. Mr. DeBriker, is that resolved? So it's agreed that that the plaintiff could change the domicile?
Yeah, absolutely, Your Honor. And the statements made about my client not willing to agree to it, that we were trying to resolve these transportation
Okay,
issues.
I don't need that. I just need your answer.
Yes,
Whether
yes, it's been resolved.
Mr. Banks, that's your understanding?
Yeah, I presented an order to Mr. DeBriker within a week of the August 21st matter. He eventually got it back to me. It's been submitted to the court and it's been entered.
Okay. I didn't see that in the paperwork, so I want to make sure that was resolved.
Yeah, I think I have that right on top here, Your Honor.
That's fine.
It's actually was entered by the court on 10/6/23.
Okay, thank you. Well, in this particular matter, I've heard the testimony of both of the parties in this case, and obviously the parties had resided at a substantial distance, previously living in different states and having to transport the child. Quite frankly, as I look at that, again, the transportation is going to be far less than the times when the child was, again, taking the plane and having to transport. And as Ms. Curtis testified that at one time, the child was in the airport or in planes or whatever for the full day. Now, I recognize that is a limited number of days per year, whereas the desired schedule would require for more trips. But again, it does appear that in this matter, the transportation is going to be less than it previously was. The court will also note that the court will recognize Shade v. Wright and the dictates of that particular case, as well as MCL 722.27a. And I will go through those factors as the court is required to look at, again, those factors for purposes of determining frequency, duration, and type of parenting time to be granted. The first factor is the existence of any special circumstances or needs of the child. There really aren't any special circumstances or needs other than these testosterone shots that have been discussed, and the court will address that in a moment. Next is whether the child obviously is less than 1, which he isn't. The child is going to be 16 in this February, so we have a much older child. Next, the reasonable likelihood of abuse or neglect of a child during parenting time. There's been no testimony about that, so the court's not going to consider that. Next factor, reasonable likelihood of abuse of a parent resulting from the exercise of parenting time. There's been no testimony about that as well. Next factor is the inconvenience to or burdensome impact on the child of traveling for the purposes of parenting time. The court is taking that into consideration, but as I've stated, the child effectively would be spending far less time in transportation. I would note as well, it does appear that the parties somewhat exaggerated the times on how much the child will be in the vehicle. And the courts will note as well that the parties have ignored, if you would, the fact that when the child is in the car with a particular parent, they're able to spend good time discussing things with the parent during that transportation. So it's not a case where, again, the transportation is only burdensome, but in fact, it gives the other parent a time to have one-on-one contact with the child to discuss things that have been happening, things that they are planning, or anything of that nature. So court doesn't look at this as only being a burden, but that it might in fact have a desired effect of allowing the parents of one-on-one time as well. Next factor is whether a parent can reasonably be expected to exercise parenting time. It does appear that the defendant has exercised his parenting time in accordance with the court order. Next factor is whether a parent has frequently failed to exercise reasonable parenting time. There's been no testimony about the defendant failing to exercise his parenting time. Next factor is the threatened or actual detention of the child. That has not been an issue in this case. Neither party has discussed that. And other relevant factors, and the court will address some of those as we go on. In this particular matter, the court will also note that the child, at the child's age, at least as of February, we're only talking 2 more years, so there's a limited time that this parenting time schedule is going to have an impact in any event. So the court looks at that as being really a de minimis particular period of time. What the court will do in this matter is the court is going to modify the parenting time, and the court is going to allow the defendant father parenting time with the minor child and for fall break of each year. That would testimony has been that that's in October. The court would allow the father alternating Thanksgiving, which would start in him receiving 2024 as the plaintiff obviously had the child this Thanksgiving. The court would allow the defendant to have 1/2 of the Christmas break, which would include Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, in the year 2024. There are apparently the parties have testified, and specifically the plaintiff has testified about plans this year. So the court's going to leave the current Christmas break schedule in place during this year, and then change that to commence with the defendant in 2024, and then the alternating years thereafter. The court would continue to have the defendant having spring break of each year. And what the court would do is the court, as it relates to the weekends, that's been a discussion. The court is going to allow the defendant to have weekend parenting time. Court notes that the plaintiff had testified she works every weekend, so it's not a burden to her. It's not a time that she would miss because she's working, and the child would be available to be with the defendant during that time. The court would allow that weekend to occur on the third weekend of each month, first full weekend, and that would occur from Friday at 6:00 p.m. to Sunday at 6:00 p.m. That would be Michigan time. And the court would state that if the defendant is not available, that he would waive that weekend parenting time. So if his schedule changes and he's on duty or whatever it might be, that he would waive that particular time. What that works out to is the weekends that he would have, it appears based on the current schedule, is the weekends would be those weekends that he doesn't have the other time, which, so for instance, in October, he has the fall break that he wouldn't get a weekend that month or the other time as well, if it's Thanksgiving or whatever. So he would, in this particular matter, he would get effectively, he would get September. He would have November if he doesn't have Thanksgiving weekend holiday. He'd get January, February, April, and May. So we're talking about only 6 weekends out of the year that he would get the child, and that the parties would, in fact, meet at a halfway point. They would meet at a police department as requested by the plaintiff, and that would occur at wherever it is. If it's Michiana or Mishawaka, I don't know which one it is. It would be at the halfway point, and that's where they would meet. For the summer parenting time, the defendant can exercise his parenting time in a 6-week or 1/2 block. Depends on the schedule. So I'm not going to say always 6 weeks. It should be 6 weeks, but I don't know if there's a change in that summer schedule. That he would be able to exercise that in a 6-week block, provided he's trained to give the child his testosterone shot, or he has appointments set up to have that shot done at a clinic where the defendant resides. If he does not have that set up, then the defendant shall bring the child back to the plaintiff for the shot, and then that particular summer, whichever time that would be, that summer, it would change back to the 2-3 week periods of time with an intervening week where mom would be with the child for that intervening week in which she gives the child the shot. Court would note that defendant is also allowed the parenting time during Father's Day, which he could coordinate with his summer parenting time. Court would order that the parties would exchange insurance cards or information within 30 days of today's date. They'll get the information that they need for coordination of benefits between the insurance policies, each party insuring the child for medical, dental, and vision, as they each testify they have. Court would also order that the parties would each sign a parental consent or release form for the other party, and they would do that within 30 days of today's date as well. I think that covers all of the issues before the court. Mr. DeBreiker, is there anything else that the court has failed to address or needs to address before we conclude?
I don't believe so. Just one quick clarifying question regarding the summer parenting time. And I believe it was order of the court. He can do it in either the 6-week block or the 2-3 week blocks, depending on if he can get the shot. Should there be a time in this order that he has to notify her, I guess, what his intent is Or how should we handle that?
Let's do it this way, just so we make sure, have him that he would notify her by May 1 of each year as to if he has the arrangements for purposes of the shot. And he would have to basically notify her by May 1 of each year as to the dates he's taking the child as well. Anything else, Mr. DeBriker?
I don't believe so, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Banks, is there anything else you believe the court needs to address or fail to address before we conclude?
I have just a couple of questions for clarification, Your Honor. Did I hear the court state that as far as the summer parenting time is concerned, that he gets 6 weeks or 1/2 of the summer?
Correct.
So if 1/2 of the summer is less than 6 weeks, we're going to just do sheer days from point A, from the day they recess to the day they go back. We can figure that out mathematically.
Correct.
Okay.
And that would be dictated by the school district in which the child is in, which is the Harper Creek School District.
All right. So I wanted to be clear about that. The insurance cards exchanged, that's just the policy numbers, the actual card or something? Because I know my client has one insurance that doesn't even have an insurance card, but.
Well, then she would exchange the insurance information.
Okay, she doesn't have to supply her social security number or any of those.
She doesn't have to supply her social security. She can give the insurance company, the policy number, the address of the insurance company, whatever. So the parties are able to coordinate benefits if that's necessary.
Okay, and as far as the Christmas break is concerned, and I apologize, I wrote this down. I thought I wrote it down correct. The Christmas break stays the same for 2023. Next year, beginning in 2024, would he get the first half? Even though
he gets the first half, which would include Christmas Eve and Christmas Day.
Even though he has that this year?
No, I thought your client testified she had it this year.
No, Mr.
Okay.
So would he get the second half?
Then he would not. He would just get the 1/2 that would coordinate with her having Christmas Eve and Christmas Day next year.
So second half goes to defendant in 2024.
Correct.
All right.
I guess I confused the testimony. I thought she talked about the arrangement she had with family and all that, and I thought she stated she was having the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, because she also testified. Well, I guess she testified, yes, that he had Friday through Tuesday, which would have given him those days. Correct. Yeah,
she was just going to delay exercising, or well, kind of pretending for the other child what Christmas Day was until he gets back home on the 26th.
Well, looks like that's resolved now then.
All right. I think that's it.
I had one last question, I guess, just to avoid any future issues. The weekend parenting time is the third weekend of the month. If that happens to fall on a holiday, I don't know if they got a Friday or a Monday off. Is that included for any reason? Is it just Friday through Sunday, no matter what?
No, if there's a holiday, then it would extend through that Monday. The typical standard parenting time issue.
Sure.
Holidays
so the day prior to school.
Excuse me?
So essentially the day prior to school, if they have that Monday off or something, or.
Yeah, that would be, it'd be extended through that Monday. If it's a holiday that he receives, I didn't really think that was an issue because he doesn't have that many holidays. So.
Right. I doubt. I haven't looked at the calendar, obviously, just avoiding future conflict if we can.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Banks?
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. DeBriker. I'll ask that you would prepare the order, submit it to Mr. Banks for his approval, and then submit it to the court.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Judge. Have a good day.
Court will conclude this matter at